Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome back to our Pastor's Chat in this wonderful month. Oh, we started September.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. We have just a couple things to chat about today. So first of all, we have a simple question to warm us up. Then we'll talk about the results of a survey that we took here just to kind of feel out people's emotions or their what they're looking for that would help them regather. So what it would take to regather our people.
Very helpful. We heard from you all, so we want to let you know what everybody else is saying.
Right, so we'll talk through that. And then next we'll remind you of our next steps in our regathering plan. And then finally we'll talk about the sermon
Sunday.
coming this Sunday. So
sounds good.
All right, so Dave, recently on Facebook, there was a sports-related question asked.
On
and
the church group.
In the church group.
Yep.
We're not going to answer that one, but the question was, are you Steelers or Eagles fan?
Yeah, that's very limiting, you know.
I know, it is.
Okay.
So anyways, in that, I mean, I gave my response. It wasn't necessarily helpful, but what I thought would be a good question today was going back to our high school time frame or even college. That's fine as well.
For some of us, that's further back than others.
That's right. That's right. What sport, you might have played multiple sports, but in that, what was the sport that you most enjoyed that you played?
Oh,
how about that? I mean, you can name the sports you played.
Okay, so growing up, I went to Christian school, and so we didn't have football. We had soccer because all it takes for equipment is 2 nets and 1 ball. And whereas in football, you need so much more stuff, all the pads and everything. So I played soccer in high school, and in 9th grade, my family moved to upstate New York, from New Jersey to upstate New York. And in the process of that move, I went from a school that emphasized soccer to a school that emphasized basketball. And so I got dragged into basketball, and I really enjoyed that, actually.
Wonderful sport.
Yeah.
So for me, I grew up playing basketball a lot, actually, on local leagues. Never really played for school, but the sport I played for school was tennis. I love, and to this day, I still love tennis. So I was that tennis kid.
And I hear you playing tennis with young people and people more experienced than you by double your age. And I mean, we've got some tennis players here at Calvary and in Coopersburg area.
Yes, and tennis is a wonderful sport. So so if anybody wants to play Dave in some basketball, swing by the church, and
you'll probably beat me.
If you want to play some tennis, let us know.
He'll probably beat you. He's pretty good.
Maybe. No, don't wait. Anyways, let's continue.
Yes.
So our results of the survey.
Yes, you can see this is a lot of results.
Yes.
This is the summary.
Yes.
I actually read the raw data. You want to guess how many pages that is?
The raw data.
Yeah.
Ooh, 40.
The summary is like 25. The raw data is like 160 something pages.
Wow, it's amazing. Well, here's the first thing I'll tell you. We had 87 people respond. Now, you think about that, that's probably also households or one person from a household responding. So it's neat to think about. And we also got an idea that, we had all different ages responding. They did say 50% were of the older age, and then below that, or 63% were of the older age, and then everything else was below that.
That's very politically correct of you. An older age.
Right. Thank you.
Age 50 and up, by the way.
There you go. You can be specific. Go ahead.
I'm just laughing because an older age, I'm like really bumping up against that.
Oh, there you go. So how do you define what's old, right?
Exactly. Usually old is 10 years older than wherever you are.
There you go. So I remember my dad always said that it was when you decided that you were old. So
my dad always just says, don't get old, it's overrated.
Ah. So in the end, they kind of broke it out into, 3 categories. It said the 3 categories of people stand out regarding barriers to the return.
Yeah.
So, and we found out it was 1, A, health concerns, B, experimental restriction barriers, and C, already back or ready soon. Yeah,
so we have these 3, and you call them categories, but they're just kind of the ways people are looking at and really the situations they find themselves in. And so, like you say, there are these 3 different primary groups, and it's not nobody's clear cut, right?
No,
It's things wash into each other. But for our purposes, this was very helpful that our communications team was able to kind of identify these 3 different ways of viewing when it's okay to be back at church.
Right, and I think what it really needs to be heard is that as you go through this survey, what you learn is that there isn't an actual, not everybody falls. Our church doesn't weigh towards one side or the other.
Oh, no.
I think that's important. I think a lot of people were curious, and even myself, I was like, I wonder if we weigh towards this side or weigh towards that side, because we all know that in this, people are just emotionally feeling different about whether with mask wearing, not mask wearing, restrictions, not restrictions, all of it is a very emotional and hard to navigate thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's just point out then these 3 categories, which they're not exactly a third, but it's not that far off. You've got 40% of us saying that it's going to be some time before we're comfortable coming back to church. 78% of that, it was because of health concerns.
Right.
And then the other 22% had some other. So even that 40% isn't totally homogenous.
Right.
And then you had, we think, about 40% on the other side saying the restrictions are a real barrier to returning.
Or we would like to make those decisions, stuff like that type of language.
And then kind of a middle 20%, actually 21%, saying we've already returned or we're just about there, ready to come back.
Right.
So it kind of is, we're right down the line, people all over the place, and this lines up with the world around us.
Yes, it does.
Our community around us, other churches around us.
Christians in general.
In our denomination, outside of our denomination.
Yeah.
We're all struggling.
And I wanted to point out, it's interesting that even Dave had talked to other pastors around the area, and that some other churches had done things like this and had the same results.
Yes, it was other churches, even in our community, had let me read I read their surveys before reading ours, and it was like reading the same thing again.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, I was glad to hear it from our people, but we're hearing the same thing as other people.
Yeah, and I just had after taking this in, the big thing that I left with was that this is why we need to be loving and talking with each other.
Oh, so much. Yeah.
I believe that everybody has valid reason, believes not only do they have valid reason, but they believe it's coming from biblical reason and prayer of why they feel the way they feel. And I think that's important to all of us to humbly understand that we're all taking this in differently. But the only way we're going to be able to handle and understand the other side is if we talk to the other side.
Yep.
And that's one of my big encouragements right now, is to actually be willing to humbly listen to somebody that might be on a view that you might say, how could they ever think that way? I want to encourage you to change your thought and say, well, I want to understand my brother and sister in Christ, and I want to be able to love with them and bear with them and hear and understand.
Yeah, and that's a good point, loving and bearing with them, because listening doesn't mean that necessarily your view will be swayed or my view will be swayed.
That's right.
But I can appreciate where you're coming from.
Absolutely.
And I can love you. And I mean, I think one of the things that we took out of this, I mean, the reason we wanted to do the survey was to find out what do we need to do when we're in renovations and we can't meet upstairs in the sanctuary. I'm pointing upstairs, but everybody watching on the screen, it's not
sanctuary is up there.
Yeah, it's right above us. But so this survey was helpful for that, but it was helpful in some other things because it allowed the elders to continue to have this discussion, and we had representatives of all 3 groups in the elder room.
Right.
And it also allowed us to say, how can we best serve and minister to all 3 of these groups of people, which is what our regathering plan has evolved into. To say we continue the live stream for those who can't be back yet due to health concerns. We continue the highly restricted services for those who are at that point, and then we add an extra service with fewer restrictions and Calvary Kids, Lord willing, coming up pretty soon.
Absolutely.
That was something else this survey said, is that about 1/3 of our people not having children's ministry is huge. I mean, it's hard to come to church without that. And so,
that's right. I mean, I've brought my kids in the recent situation. They do well, but you might get a nice little show if you're sitting behind them as they play with their little action figures and stuff like that across the back of the pew.
Right. And even that, it's one at a time.
Right.
But
I think the other thing that results came out is that at this point we're not going to go to another location. I think we've made that clear. So that we did learn that from the survey, and that was really helpful. And I think it's also important to note, as Dave was just talking about all the steps we're working on Regathering, that helped us to be able to do this. But
very much so.
We're doing that because we really do have the goal to bring our people back to worship together. But we also want to make it known that we also understand that a lot of people also have doctors that are recommending that they stay home at this point, and they also have, maybe there are some fears that people are genuinely dealing with, and we want to make it clear at this point that don't feel that you are wrong at this point. That if you're at home waiting till this thing is at the point where you're ready and comfortable, come back.
Yeah. So the church gathered, in person and online together, I continue to say is legitimate, but less than ideal.
Yes.
Less than ideal.
Right. We should desire to be together in physical person. I think that's the key, is we need to be. You see that, that's those accountable relationships. And as Dave and I were talking about this too, we said, in this, you can still call someone, you can still video conference with someone, but we do know that we're meant to be, be in person.
And I mean, let's take that one step further. There's a danger of, okay, we arrived, we're in person, now we're all set, and we can still not connect with one another. So let's make sure as we do get back to gathering that we actually connect with people, and before we even before everyone is able to regather, that we don't use that as an excuse not to connect with people.
Right.
Connect with people from home as well.
And just my last statement about this is, if you're someone that is at home and you're kind of thinking, wow, I really like this, and I'd warn you to be careful of your heart, that us being in isolation away from people is not what God intended. We were meant to commune together. We were meant to be in communion with our Lord first, but He also designed a body of Christ to be together to use and serve in the capacity of the gifts that God has given you. That's one of my encouragements for those people that are at home that right now that might be saying, you could be coming back, but you're saying, I like the comfort of my home and the couch, or the easy access, or walking around, or taking care of things around their house. We do need to. We should have a desire to be with our brothers and sisters in Christ.
So we absolutely want to make sure that we don't pressure you if you're in high risk. If you're in, if you're in one of those categories that you shouldn't be around people, then there is no pressure to gather. But we also want to make sure we don't let you get too comfortable.
That's right.
If you're not in that position of saying, I'm going to withdraw from the body. And so we want to encourage you to join us. And of course, we have more opportunities for that to happen coming up this month. Right?
Yeah. So we want to get these dates. We're going to tell them to you right now.
Okay. Go for it.
So our first one on September 20th.
Yes.
That's going to be the first Sunday that we add a second service. Okay. So our first service will remain to be our service that has the masks on through the whole service, and actually all the precautions in place. Okay. And then we're going to have a second service that follows that service. Times are not.
It's 9 and 10:45.
Okay, good.
Back to our normal times.
9 and 10:45. And the way that one will work is kind of like you've been seeing with restaurants and some of the businesses, is that masks are worn while you're in the building. Masks are worn if you're moving around. But once you're in your seat and when you're with your family unit with the proper social distancing in the room, the mask can come off during that time frame. But it's important to also say, though, for singing at this time, we're still saying the masks need to remain on. And I think it's also important to mention that that's also why we have the singing at the end, because that is a lot of breathing and a lot of air moving. So we have it at the end so we can get out of the building once it's over.
Yep. And our safety committee has acquired and continues to be in process of acquiring air purifiers that
Yes.
they'll be running actively during the in between and I guess during the time as well, but really cranking that up in between to make sure between the services.
I also wanted to say to everyone too that if you do have children and you feel uncomfortable to bring them back, I want you to know, Dave, myself, all the pastors, we don't mind if there's a child that's maybe a little upset in the service.
After not hearing anybody
right.
for months. Having kids being fidgety is not a problem. We're happy to have you.
By the way, you might have saw in one of the Sundays when I was up talking and welcoming, my daughter's head went across the screen. But we wanted to say that's important. If you ever feel like you're a distraction, no, we want you to be there. So, and if it ever gets overwhelming, you can always step out, and that's totally fine. But moving
children's
on,
ministry comes back.
We have a goal. We wanted to bring back, and the goal is September 27th. We are doing everything that we can to bring that back. But we want to mention that there is a lot of things that we need for Calvary Kids, and we'll say it again that we need the volunteers. So if you have been volunteer, we encourage you to come back. We're trying to make it as safe as we can, and so talk to Jen Yanka. Additionally, we'll need we need to figure out the spacing. And especially that's going to get difficult soon, and we'll talk about that as we close. But we want to encourage people to be ready for that. And we will say at this point we're dealing with the children. The children will have moments with masks, and we're still handling all the details with that.
Right, but plans are being made. Children's Ministry is working hard on that. Point out that Calvary Kids will only take place during the second service. So only one service, but it will be the second one. Right. So the 10:45 service will be when the children's ministry will take place.
So keep praying with us as we are working through all the logistics in that, and that we really are praying and hopeful that September 27th Calvary Kids will officially start.
Right.
That's what we're going for. Right. That's our hope, but we do need those things to happen.
And along with that, when we talk about the space and where they're going to be, is of course the building renovation.
We have a building update.
Yes. And so we have been looking at somewhere around the end of September as the time that ground gets broken. And when they do that, all of the classrooms downstairs will no longer be available for children's ministry. And so we're looking at putting them in other places in the building and maybe even using one of our other buildings for that. So we'll get that all figured out.
Right, and make that clear again, it's the room that we are currently in, which is actually the main Calvary, the older kids' room. These rooms will not be able to be used.
We steal their stage.
Right, we do steal their stage. They won't be able to get used. So you can pray with us as we have to figure out how to use the different buildings that we have and the space that we have.
And when that happens, the adults will no longer be in the sanctuary either, and we'll be in the fellowship hall.
Yep, and we'll have to figure out if we have space for overflow or if it's just multiple services. So there's a lot. You can tell there's just so much.
Pray for us, please.
Right. So, and lastly then...
well, let me say one more thing about all this stuff going on at the end of September is that September 20th, when we go to 2 services, is when we start our new series on the book of Daniel, looking at an uncommon time period, and as a result, how there was uncommon faith in God. So
get ready, and we've been encouraging, and we hope that many of our Connect groups look like they'll be along with the sermons, trying to study that as a church. We're going to be looking at the book of Daniel and having our minds on that idea of uncommon faith.
So if you're not in a Connect group,
get connected.
Get connected.
And so this coming Sunday. This is our second to last sermon on
rebuild.
Right,
and it's also the second out of 3 in the book of Esther. So we've been looking in Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther as we've sought to rebuild through the difficult times that we've faced. Last week we were at the beginning of Esther. This
rebuild
week,
life.
Middle, rebuild life. This week, rebuild courage. Esther's people faced tremendous challenge, and her cousin challenged her to say, hey, you can do something about this. And she said, I don't know that I can. And it's going to be risky. It could cost me my life. And he encouraged her to have the courage that was necessary. And so we get to see how Esther responded and also see how we can respond when we're given the choice of do what is right and hard or kind of shirk from it.
So we always encourage you when we have the pastor's chat, read Esther
3 and 4. Yeah, it's not very long.
Right.
It's about 1 page if you have a Bible with small print, probably
right.
2 pages if you have a large print.
And here's a funny recommendation if you're like, oh, I struggle to find time for reading. I usually play the Bible, listen to the audio Bible while I'm cooking breakfast.
Oh, there you go.
So that just a little solution for all of you.
Now, just curious, is that a speaker that everybody in the house can hear, or is it right in your ears?
It's a little Amazon dot, so it's everybody's can hear
okay.
it.
Yeah, everybody nearby. Yep.
That's right. Well, thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll see you again.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.